For your first assignment in Illustrator, you're going to be designing a poster for one of the 7 deadly sins. And we're going to do it in 3 steps. For the first part, you're going to really be working with color, and I want you to be sure to watch the tutorial on working with color and conveying meaning with color before you jump into this part of the assignment. So for the very first part, you're going to create color palettes for just 5 of the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins are lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. So for each of these 5 sins, you're going to make a total of 3 color palettes, one that utilizes the following color theory relationships, and you can learn more about these relationships in that color presentation. So the first one's complementary, the second is analogous, and the third is triadic. So you're going to have 2 colors for the complementary, you're going to have 3 colors for the analogous, and you're going to have 3 colors for the triadic color harmony. In the end, you will have 15 color palettes total, because you're going to have 3 palettes per sin, and you have 5 sins. Then I want you to provide a brief explanation. You do want to keep it brief as to why you chose those colors. Like for instance, if I was going to use envy, and I use this in my tutorial, I might think of the bike that my best friend growing up had. She had this really pretty Schwinn bike, and I was so envious of it. I was very envious of that and her blonde hair. So maybe I would pick some colors in that palette, and I would give a brief description because of Jenny Brandel's Schwinn bike. All right, so that's what you're going to be doing. Let's look at some examples so it makes more sense. And again, this is 7 Deadly Sins Working with Color Part 1. These are some student project examples, and they're for reference only. These are not the only solutions. It's important that you create your own ideas and your interpretations of using color to convey meaning. So here's the first one, and I want to break this down. So here are the 5 sins the student chose to work with: gluttony, pride, sloth, lust, and greed. And then the top are her complementary colors. The second are her triadic, and the third are her analogous. And then right below that, she has a brief description as to why she chose the color. And you're going to start with one color, and you're going to find its complement. So you're really talking about this specific color right here. I thought this was a successful one because it's very well organized, it's very clean, and it's just very pleasant to look at. Here's one that has is a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more vivacious. Very similar though, right? Kept with the basic shape, only chose to overlap them and stack them. So here's her lust, sloth, greed, pride, wrath. We have 2 dots. Here's complementary, here is analogous, and here is triadic. So she walks you through all those. Here's a 3rd student that got a little bit more sophisticated with it. So she has her, oops, sorry about that. She has her complementary, her analogous, and then her triadic at the bottom, and below it she gives her brief reasons. And the last one got pretty creative here and decided to get a little bit more funky with the way that they displayed their colors and really played around. So you're definitely encouraged to play around, and this is your chance to really experiment with Illustrator, with color, and with type as well. But you're really focusing here just on the color, because we're going to focus on type next. We're going to look at that next. So 7 Deadly Sins, Part 2, is going to be choosing typography. So continuing with your 7 Deadly Sins, in this next step, you're going to pair your color palettes with some type or some font choices to further communicate that essence or the idea, the nature of that sin. And you're going to design layouts for the 5 sins you've already started working with. You're going to take your favorite color palette, you're going to include the name of the sin and its definition, and then I want you to brainstorm and come up with 10 words you associate with that sin. So if I was going to think of words that I associate with envy, I would think of things like jealous, of course, or want, desire, maybe even a little bit of, I don't know, greed or something. That's another sin though. Okay, so you're just going to, again, I could put in there that Jenny's Schwinn bike, that I was envious of that. Maybe sometimes I'm envious of people who are taller than me. So maybe it's something about height. I don't know. I'm just kind of free forming here. So here's what you're going to actually do though. You're going to create 6 artboards in Illustrator. Your first artboard is going to be used for a type study. And then the 5 subsequent artboards will be 1 per sin. So on that first artboard, you're going to write the name of the sin and its definition. I want you to show me the name in 3 typefaces and the definition in 3 different typefaces. And then I want you to list those 10 words. So you're going to do that for all 5. So you're going to start looking at type and you're going to think about, does this typeface look good with this typeface? Is there enough contrast? Is there a reason for changing it up? So you might go with something a little bit more decorative or display for the name, and then you might go with something a little more straightforward and clean for the actual definition. And then you gotta get those 10 words on there, okay? So let's look at how that turns out into a project. So here we have the first, this is the type study page right here. Then we have gluttony, greed, pride, wrath, and sloth. I really enjoyed the way the student organized this information, how they worked their color palette into the background, and how they just created very easy to navigate and pleasant looking layouts. So again, first page is a type study where you're gonna list the name of the sin, 3 different typefaces, you're gonna list the definition of that sin, and 3 other typefaces, additional typefaces, and then you're gonna list your 10 words. Here's her 10 words, name, sin, right? Here's another example, one who started to already think about some imagery, explored a little bit more, really trying out the different tools. So here's another way that you could go about it. But again, your first page is your sins and your type study, and then the next subsequent 5 pages are 1 per the 5 sins you've been working with. Here's the third one. So you can see everybody has a different take on this, and you're gonna do your take, but what you must do is this type study on page 1, and then have your 5 additional layouts, 1 per sin. And then you're gonna end up in the end with 1 poster for 1 sin with visual imagery to convey the idea of that sin. So working you through basically the design process and how to approach intentional compositions. The culmination of this project, again, is going to be 1 poster for 1 of the 7 deadly sins. So you've created your color palettes, you've chosen fonts, and you've generated some ideas or imagery associated with the characteristics of the 5 of the 7 deadly sins. Those word associations were to help you start thinking about images. Now to complete this, using those words, you're going to create an illustration that captures and exemplifies visually the nature of your chosen sin. And I do want you to keep this relatively PG-13, okay? For example, if you choose sloth, perhaps you thought about things that are slow, things that are lazy, like a fat cat, or a couch potato, or snails, molasses, etc. Using these words to create imagery as guides, come up with some kind of visual representation, an illustration, using what you've now learned in Illustrator. Integrate that into the template poster you've already created. So here's your process. You're going to create that poster. You're going to use letter size. You're going to use your color palette that is subject to adjustment at this point. You're going to use typefaces, and you need to use 2, 1 for the name and 1 for the sin. You do not need to include those 10 words. Those were just to help you generate imagery. Then you're going to use Illustrator to create that, and you're going to use it, you're going to have it as if we were preparing for print, so you CMYK. All right, here's some examples. Really great color combination, really vibrant, really gives a sense of pride, and is very creative. So that's one. Here's the second one. And I want to point out that most of these students had not used Illustrator before. So you are going to, in 3 weeks of this class, be able to create work like this. So we've got this lovely typeface here for gluttony, and then we have another typeface that pairs really nicely with it by this contrast below it. There's a strong one for wrath with great complementary colors of blue and orange. And 2 typefaces that work well together, but they are not the same. Love this one with this pattern and this light really shining a spotlight on this. And then the working of the sin inside that bun is just so great. Limitless appetite for food and drink. I love how that's scaling up. Very Hollywood in a way too. The close-up, this on the face of this greedy person really is an interesting point of view and really pulls us into us and makes us feel. And I love the red and the green. Again, that's complementary colors. Very similar, or same sin, but a very different feeling than what we got back here, right? Here we see this idea of a volcano exploding. And I like this playfulness of the type on a path. That's something you're going to learn to do. Now they're, again, very creative. Pick your poison, envy. I love the way this really pops out. And then you've got this ghost bottle like trailing out this poison. And then you've got these really nice type pairing again. How many did I put in here? Let's see. I think that's it. So hopefully that helps you get a good sense of what's expected at each stage of this first project, where you start with your colors, then you choose your typography, and then you create your visual imagery. Of course, if you have any questions, please reach out. And most importantly, have fun.